Hi everybody. Today's lesson's on ideas that shaped Darwin's thinking. Even though Darwin is the father of evolution, he didn't come up with his theories of evolution alone. He was influenced by many other scientists and many other people along the way. So as Darwin sailed around the world and looked at all the different organisms at every place he stopped, one of the things that he had with him to kill the time was a book on geology. And in Darwin's time, this is the 1830s, most people believe that the Earth was 6,000 years old, right? They got that idea from religion. However, that's problematic if you're coming up with a theory on evolution, because evolution has changed over time, so you need more time in order to account for all the evolution of different organisms. So geologists began to gather evidence that the Earth is not thousands of years old, but actually millions of years old. So what they did is they see slow processes like erosion, right? And how they change the continents over time. If you look at the Grand Canyon, it's this giant hole in the Earth, and at the bottom of the Grand Canyon is a teeny tiny river, and it must have took more than just a few thousand years for that small river to erode away all that rock to make the Grand Canyon. So, how did this evolution help Darwin form his how did this information help Darwin form his theory on evolution? It told Darwin that there is enough time for organisms to change very, very, very slowly from generation to generation, just like the Earth is changing over time. Darwin was also influenced by an economist named Thomas Malthus. You see, Malthus was studying population growth of England, right? And this is at the time of the English Industrial Revolution. So the English population was growing exponentially, and we see the population growth curve here in green. And Malthus theorized that even though the population is growing exponentially, England's ability to grow and import food was only increasing linearly, as this yellow line right here. So he realized that there will reach a point right here where the population size exceeds the amount of food produced in the country, and at that point the population of England is going to run out of resources, and then some people are going to die by not having enough food or other resources. This information was very helpful for Darwin because it allowed Darwin to know that there's always going to be a struggle for existence for living things. And what decides which people will survive and which people will die from starvation? The final idea that shaped Darwin's thinking was from farmers and animal breeders. Farmers knew that they could breed certain characteristics in their livestock and in their crops. So here we have a farmer who bred his cattle to have extremely large horns. Well, in order to do breeding like this, you need natural variation. Right? You need some cows that have relatively short horns and some cows that have larger horns. And in order to get cows that have extremely large horns like this, right, you find two of your cattle that have the biggest horns that you possibly have and you mate them. Right? And then you look at the next generation of cows and you find the cows that have the biggest horns and you mate them. And from generation to generation, the horn size in cows gets larger and larger and larger. Right? Now, again, this requires what Darwin called natural variation, right? Individual organisms, same species, must have differences, right? So this is all about genetic diversity that we talked about in earlier chapters, but of course, Darwin had no idea of genetics. But he knew that things had different traits. Now, he called this process of farmers selecting what traits they found useful and only allowing those organisms to reproduce, he called that artificial selection. So in artificial selection, nature provides the variations, and humans select the variations that they find useful to get passed on to the next generation. Right? This process is also known as selective breeding. So how did Darwin find this information helpful in developing his theory of evolution? What he realized was that that there is natural variation among populations, and that's needed for evolution. And B, some traits can be passed on from parents to offspring. Right? It seems obvious to us, but remember, Darwin had no clue about, genetics or heredity or anything like that. So that's it for today's lesson, guys. Thank you.